What is going on, New York Giant fans? Welcome back to another Big Blue in the Bronx YouTube channel video. Hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. Also, share this out as well. We'll be live for the Thursday night game. Lions, Packers, join us here. We'll be doing all the good stuff. Sunday, we'll be streaming the Jets-Chiefs game. Monday night, we'll be streaming the Giants-Seahawks game. And Saturday night, I'm supposed to have a Seahawks guest on. The show should probably start around 8:10 Saturday night, at least according to plans right now. Seahawks Giants preview. So I said I would get into this video a few times, and I'm finally doing that. Talking about the Giants' problems with the offensive line. Now, there's 4 reasons I believe they have been bad over the past few years, and we could probably all recount. It's going back to the year after, really, they won the Super Bowl, and a lot of people do recall the offensive line wasn't even 100% in 2011 when the Giants won the Super Bowl. I'm not going to go back too far in history when talking about the offensive line, the personnel, these things, and all the other stuff, because it's kind of a repetitive story in a lot of senses. Like, we know Eric Flowers was a bust. We know Weston Richburg wasn't good. We know Justin Pugh didn't stay healthy. I don't want to repeat that 100 times over, but I want to get into really what I think the 4 reasons are for the New York Giants offensive line being bad continuously over the last few years. Now, sometimes you can't look at sacks. I will say that before we get into the specifics, whatnot. You can't look at like sacks taken. I'll give you an example. 2016, 2017, the Giants were not that bad in terms of giving up sacks. But what's the reasoning for that? Well, the reasoning for that was that the Giants had a quick passing game. It was mainly slants. Ben McAdoo, Mike Sullivan offense. It was mostly slants. OBJ. I don't think Ruben Randall was around at that time. He actually was off the team. Sterling Shepard. You guys remember the 2016, 2017 years under Mike Solari. I mean, they got rid of him. Again, we'll get into that in a separate note. But some sack numbers can be misleading. But what you can say, though, for those offensive lines, 2016, 2017, is that the New York Giants could not get a single thing going in the running game. Rashad Jennings couldn't rush for anything. Paul Perkins couldn't get any rushing yards. Orleans Darkwa, if you guys remember that name. But we're going to get into it. However, first, I do want to shout out our sponsor, that's SeatGeek. If you guys are going to a Giants game, a concert of some sort, need parking passes for whatever stadium you're going to, this SeatGeek code will help, and that's, of course, Big Blue in the Bronx. You get $20 off your entire order with the promo code Big Blue in the Bronx. So let's start with reason number 1. That is a C word. Now, the C word is not always a good word. I'm not talking about the curse word, though. This word is very subjective. Depends. C word, continuity. Continuity. The Giants have not much continuity on the offensive line over the last few years. I mean, if I'm thinking the offensive line right now, the longest tenured one is Andrew Thomas, who was drafted in 2020. But I'm going to start in 2018. I'm going to go back there. Now, the way I'm going to do these things is with the continuity. I'll list how many players played at each position. So 2018, you had 1 left tackle, and that was Nate Solder, who gave up 11 sacks, I believe. It was either 11 or 7 sacks. One of those numbers. 1 left guard, that was Will Hernandez, who played all right. You had 3 different centers. You had John Halapio. Then you had John Greco. And then you had Spencer Pulley. We'll get into the personnel later on. Hint, hint. You had 3 different right guards. You had Patrick Omame. You had, it wasn't Zeitler yet. It was Jamon Brown, and you also had John Greco, who was there for a little bit, and then he got benched. And then you had 3 different right tackles. It was really 2, but there was a game where Chad Wheeler left with a concussion, and Brian Mahalik filled in. But the first 2 games of 2018 was Eric Flowers at right tackle, which was abysmal, and then Chad Wheeler took over for the rest of the season, which was 14 games. So move on to 2019. Same left tackle, Nate Solder. He played poorly, and that didn't help because Daniel Jones was a rookie quarterback. Well, Hernandez was in. Severe regression. 2 centers. and they both regressed, I would argue. John Halapio, who looked good against the Cowboys and the Jaguars the previous year before he got hurt and broke his foot, at least I think that was the injury, he regressed. He was terrible. And then you got a guy in Spencer Pulley who you kept over. He wasn't good either. Two right guards. Kevin Zeitler was the best Giants offensive lineman probably for the next 2 years, in my opinion. I mean, he was a solid pass blocker, wasn't really known too much for his run blocking, but could get some stuff done. And the other right guard was Nick Gates, if you guys remember that. Did not play at left guard, did not play at center yet, did not play at left tackle. He played at right guard and right tackle. One right tackle game, I believe that was against the Jets. And I believe he also played right guard. I want to say it was right guard against the Eagles, right guard or right tackle against the football team, and also played against the Dolphins. So he had some experience, both right tackle and right guard. You move over to right tackle besides Nick Gates, and you had Mike Remmers, who I thought was solid, but he didn't really do the job. It was a stopgap type of thing. They signed him in May, and then they ended up cutting Chad Wheeler. So move to 2020. Nate Solder opts out. You have Andrew Thomas, rookie at left tackle. We know how that season went. You had two different left guards. You had Will Hernandez, and this is a new coaching staff, by the way. So it was a mix of two different coaches. We'll get into that in a minute. So you had Will Hernandez. He got COVID, which effectively kind of was his benching. Shane Lemieux comes in. They decide we're going to roll with him and a rotation of Will Hernandez too sometimes for the rest of the season. And oddly enough, yes, Lemieux was terrible, but he had better chemistry, quote unquote. That's what we heard coming from the beat media and all these different outlets. You know, he had better chemistry with Andrew Thomas. One center, that was Nick Gates. He started all 16. One right guard, that was Kevin Zeitler. He regressed a little bit, but anyway, you moved to two right tackles and Matt Peart and Cameron Fleming. Fleming wasn't that good. Was he outright terrible? No, but he was your average tackle, swing tackle, whatever. Matt Peart looked decent. So you move to 2021, and this is where shit really starts hitting the fan. Obviously, that was, I would say, much worse than 2019. And I think both seasons ended in 4 wins. So you had 3 different left tackles. You had Andrew Thomas, who got hurt a little bit. You had Nate Solder, who was left tackle against the Cowboys and looked like utter garbage. And you also had Matt Peart, who played a little left tackle against the Raiders, some of these other teams we faced, the Panthers, when Andrew Thomas was out. 5 different left guards. You started the season with Shane Lemieux. Then you went to Ben Bredeson for a little bit. Then you went to Matt Skura. Wes Martin was also in there. Derek Kelly was also in there. Now, if you guys don't know the name Derek Kelly, he was a rotational guy. He played mostly against the Bears, and that was pretty much it. Matt Skura should be a name you guys know. Nick Gates, so you could possibly make the case that was 6 left guards. Obviously, the names, obviously are interchangeable with certain positions, but Nick Gates is also in there, so that's really 6 left guards if you're talking about it on an extended note. So there was no continuity, and injuries play a part in that. Bad personnel. You had 3 centers. You had Nick Gates, and Billy Price was kicked in very early before the Gates injury. So you have that, and then you also have, we got Gates, we got Billy Price. I'm missing one. Gates, Price, and Matt Skura. He started at center versus the Bears. So you moved to right guard. You had 2 different right guards. You had Will Hernandez, and I believe you had somebody else. I might be mistaken with this one, but I'm pretty sure Will Hernandez started most games at right guard. I don't think he missed any. So it's actually 1 right guard, unless I think of the name later on. And then you had 3 right tackles. You had Nate Solder, you had Matt Peart, and mix in a little bit of Corey Cunningham, who I believe started a game or 2 due to the injury to Matt Peart and the COVID for Nate Solder. So you have that. Moved to 2022, the continuity was much better. Now, was the offensive line good? It was average at best. 1 left tackle and Andrew Thomas. 3 different left guards. You had Shane Lemieux, you had Ben Bredeson, you had Nick Gates, and Josh Azudo. So actually make that 4 left guards. You had 2 centers in Nick Gates and John Feliciano. You had 1 right guard in Mark Lewinsky, which we obviously still have now. And you had 2 right tackles. You had Tyree Phillips And you also had Evan Neal, a rookie. And also mix in Matt Parrott a little bit, Corey Cunningham too. So we're 2023, and it's already shading to be worse than last year. In terms of results, in terms of continuity. Obviously, we're expected to get Bredesen and Thomas back for this week, so it may not look as, worse as it seems to most people. Maybe. 3 different left tackles already. So you had Matt Parrott a little bit against the Cowboys. You had Josh Azudu the last 2 games, and Andrew Thomas starting the first game. 2 different left guards. You had Ben Bredesen. You had Shane Lemieux. Also, you can consider a little bit of Mark Glowinski, because he played left guard against the Cardinals when Bredesen left with a concussion. You had one center, that's JMS, and he's looked fairly decent, but that's not to say much of anything because he's had a fair share of rookie struggles. You had 2 right guards in Mark Lewinsky and Marcus McKeithen, who was expected to start against Seattle, by the way. And you also have 2 right tackles. Evan Neal, Matt Parrott played a little bit against the 49ers when Neal was getting his foot taped up. So now we move on to, this is one of the bigger problems. Let's start, and I know I said I really wouldn't go too much into it, but let's start at the beginning of the food chain. Justin Pugh was a first-round pick, played with the Giants for a few years, wasn't re-signed by Dave Gettleman. Weston Richburg, second-round draft pick, ended up amounting to not much of anything. I know PFF gave him a great grade in 2016, could not stay on the field, and ended up retiring because of that. John Jerry, free agent signing, was the starter in 2015, 16, 17. He was a free agent signing, average guard at best. Bobby Hart, this one was terrible, was drafted to be a guard in 2015 and ended up playing mostly right tackle, and he was not good at that position. Eric Flowers, I don't need to go into that scenario 175 different times. We know who Eric Flowers is. Nate Solder, 4 years, $62 million contract, arguably the worst or second worst contract signed by Dave Gettleman. I'm not going to go too much into him because it's just a combination of a lot of different folks in the front office over the last few years. Will Hernandez, who was a second-round pick, was a bust. Let's put it to you that way. He regressed every single season. 2018 was good, and then he just went down. Then you move to John Halapio. Now, most people think, you signed him in 2018. That's not true. 2016, the Giants picked him up, put him on the practice squad. Then 2017, he came in when injuries were happening, ended up starting at right guard for a few games. And then 2018, started the first 2 games at center, broke his foot. 2019, started at center, was terrible. They brought him back for training camp in 2020, but he was cut. Then you move to, and I'm going out of order here, so just bear with me. Billy Price traded from Cincinnati. Not very good. Probably one of the worst centers I've ever seen. Patrick Omame. Now, if we're looking back on this contract, it's not like mega deals. It's not a mega deal. It's $5 million a year. But again, the contract situation in which it was set up wasn't good. 3 years, $15 million for Patrick Omame. Started a few games, benched due to injury, and then ended up getting cut at the bye week for Jamon Brown, who's the next guy. He was a waiver claim, started the back end of 2018, was from the Rams, mostly a run blocker, wasn't very good. John Greco, 2017, 2018 with the Giants, he was a free agent signing, decent starter. You move down, Mark Lewinsky, we know what he is right now. I'll talk about him in a minute. I'll push him off to the side. Spencer Pulley was a waiver claim from the Chargers. Wasn't very good with the Chargers. Giants picked him up as a utility guy. Matt Parrott, third-round pick, still with us to this day. Matt Skura was actually a practice squad signing. The Ravens let him go. Then the Dolphins tried him out. And then he ended up signing with us and starting a few games in 21. Shane Lemieux, fifth-round pick in 2020. John Feliciano in 2022. Free agent signing, then is now with the 49ers at this moment. And Wes Martin was a former fourth-round pick of the Commanders. I believe he's with their practice squad now, but he played in a few games for the Giants, and that was pretty much it. And also Derek Kelly was a practice squad signing, elevated to the active roster, and there's not really much to get into with that. One of the better acquisitions was Kevin Zeitler, and the Giants cut him because of a cap deficit, and they could get more money that way, which prompted them to sign Adoree Jackson and Leonard Williams back and Kenny Galladay. So I think it was like a $10 million savings. They cut Zeitler. He went to the Ravens. He's been doing solid, at least what I know. But anyway, moving forward, some of the guys that are still on this roster, we talked about Matt Peart a little bit, Shane Lemieux too. Both guys are in their final years of rookie contracts. I don't see them coming back beyond this season. Add in Josh Azudu, Marcus McKeithen, both UNC guys drafted in 22. Evan Neal drafted in 22 as well as a right tackle, 7th overall pick from Alabama. JMS second-round draft pick from this year. And then Ben Bredeson was actually in a trade via the Ravens back in 2021. Was not good at all. In 2022 was sort of a turnaround season for him. So that's personnel. In terms of personnel right now for the Giants, I think there's been a matter of injuries that have hit them, and that's not a good thing, and it's not excused. Because guess what? Everyone wanted to come out here and say, oh, you guys are ripping on Matt Peart, you guys are ripping on this, that, and the other thing. And I said this when I was doing my roster predictions and when we actually got the roster in our hands. I said, as long as Shane Lemieux does not play a game, he's fine. Shane Lemieux was absolute garbage against the 49ers. The same fucking shit we saw in his rookie year and a little bit in 22, but everybody wanted to blame the toe injury. Everyone wanted to blame this, that, and the other thing. He's not good. He wasn't good and will never amount to be a good football player, at least a left guard. Maybe he's a backup somewhere, but it's hard to think that he gets a starting job unless he totally revamps his technique in pass protection. Talked about Matt Peart, Ben Bredeson, JMS, Azudu. I wanted them to go get Dennis Kelly or a solid backup tackle, but they did not do that. They had Tyree Phillips on the practice squad. He's on the Eagles practice squad. The Giants decided they're not going to get him. They have Jalen Thomas, who's an undrafted free agent at SMU, who can play multiple positions, but he's not experienced. So that's where the crumb lies. Now let's go to number 3. That's coaching. Yeah, coaching. So the Giants had a guy by the name of Pat Flaherty from 2004 to 2015. That's a pretty long time. He was under the Coughlin era. Of course, we won 2 Super Bowls under Coughlin and had one of the best offensive lines in history for the New York Giants. David Deal, Rich Seubert, Sean O'Hara, Kareem McKenzie. Why am I missing one? Chris Snee. Those are notable names, and they were developed by Pat Flaherty, Tom Coughlin, drafted by Ernie Accorsi, signed a little bit by Jerry Reese. So I have to give him a tad bit of credit. Not much, but a tad bit of credit. So he got fired. He was done like Tom Coughlin and some of the other guys. Now, there seems to be some theories out there as to why he was supposedly hard on Eric Flowers, and that's why he got the boot, which they hired Mike Solari. Now, again, I mentioned at the beginning of the video, some of these sack numbers are a little bit deceiving because guess what? The Giants had a quick passing game in 2016 and 2017, though it wasn't good, and they allowed the 3rd least sacks in 2016, 12th least in 2017. But they also could not get the running game going. Figure that much. They go to hire Hal Hunter under the Pat Shurmur regime. He was not a good O-line coach. I think the Browns gave up like 66 sacks one season, and he was the O-line coach for that. I want to say that was something within... It was. I think it was after Shurmur was head coach in Cleveland. So you have that. They gave up the 11th most sacks in 2018, 14th most in 2019. So a little bit of improvement. But of course, everybody had to go. The personnel wasn't there. The coaching wasn't there. This, that, and the other thing, right? So also you have to note that Will Hernandez severely regressed under Hal Hunter and a lot of different other things. Anyway, move on. You had 2 O-line coaches in 2020. You had Mark Colombo and you had Dave DeGuelmo. Now, if you guys remember what happened, Joe Judge decided to bring in DeGuelmo because the offensive line wasn't performing. Colombo got butt hurt, and there was a verbal fight, and Colombo got fired. Now, you may ask, what's the connection between Colombo and Judge? There is none. Jason Garrett was that bridge. And for those of you who do not know, Jason Garrett had beef with a certain guy, and you guys know this guy well, Bill Callahan, who is the best O-line coach in the game. He had beef with him. He still has beef with him. If you guys don't know that from their days in Dallas. And that's why Bill Callahan was not at all interested in the Giants' job and went over to Cleveland with Kevin Stefanski, and their O-line is still doing solid in this league. So the Giants got Colombo, and I think maybe at this point we can consider it a gift that the O-line was decent for Dallas in some ways, mostly due to personnel. But enough on that. He gets fired. The Giants gave up the second most sacks in 2020. You saw the improvement down the line of Andrew Thomas. Shane Lemieux, you really didn't see legitimate improvement, gonna be honest. Center, Nick Gates, you knew you had something. Right guard, Kevin Zeitler, bit of a question mark because you knew the cap deficit number, cutting him and stuff like that. You knew that maybe he wouldn't be here the next season. And then you felt decent about Matt Parrott. You felt decent about him. You knew Cameron Fleming was not coming back. You knew decent about him. Plus, the option of having Nate Solder back. Brings us to 2021. My God, this offensive line at that time was not very good, and it was one of the worst I've watched. They gave up the 17th least sacks, which is probably like 15th most. Do the math there. But again, deceiving. Mike Glennon, Jake Fromm, they were the quarterbacks towards the end of the season because of the Daniel Jones injury, whatnot, all that other stuff. Now, you can make a large portion of, that whole line being just terrible roster management. Andrew Thomas was a spotlight when he wasn't injured. Nick Gates got hurt. Billy Price came in. Again, just mishmash, and it was a total fucking train wreck. It was. Let's be honest here. It was a train wreck. However, I do think there are things that Rob Sale could have fixed with his O-line, and I think at the end of the day, him and Sean Spencer were looking at the Florida job saying, hey, we're going to be with Billy Napier, so why should I give a shit about this job? It's my personal opinion. Move to the Dable era, which is the present day. Bobby Johnson is the O-line coach. Now, personally me, I campaigned in 2022 for the New York Giants to go out and hire someone who I believe is a Hall of Famer. I think he is. I don't know if he's in the Hall of Fame or he's eligible. The guy's name is Mike Munchak. For those of you who don't know, he was the Steelers O-line coach for many years, was the Broncos O-line coach in 2019, and he was a famous O-lineman with the Houston Oilers, the Tennessee Titans back in the day. And he went to a couple of Pro Bowls. And the thing is, whether he wants to be close to his kids or not, whatever. So the Giants decided to go out and hire Bobby Johnson. Now, the rumor around that time was that Buffalo wasn't necessarily mad to get rid of him. Reasons why: scheme, player development, all these other different things. So they gave up the 6th most sacks in 2022. Were there pointing concerns about his coaching? Yes and no. Because the O-line, they did give Saquon holes to run through. At the same time, they were getting figured out by the rest of the league because of the weapons and all these other different things. You never really saw improvement, going to be honest here, from Evan Neal. You didn't. There were times where he had a good game and a bad game and a good game and a bad game. But last year, there was a specific interview that Bobby Johnson did, and someone's like, yeah, Evan Neal did vertical pass sets, and he looked better at those than the aggressive ones. And Bobby Johnson was like, we got to stick to the scheme. That's basically what he said. And I got a lot of flack from people saying, oh, no, he's right on that. Okay. Mark Lewinsky. That, in my opinion, is not coaching. Actually, it might be. Because Lewinsky is part of a bigger problem that I'll get into the next one, because there is a next one, trust me. He was at least a solid pass blocker. Wasn't known for it, but was a decent pass blocker in Indy. Under DeGuelmo, under this guy, Bobby Johnson actually coached him for a year in Indy. So I don't know what that was. You move to center. One of my biggest gripes was John Feliciano. When Nick Gates came back and when he started against Dallas, I would say a good 75% of the fan base said, Nick Gates is the better center. He cannot play left guard. He needs to go in there and start. And the problem was Brian Dable and Bobby Johnson had favoritism towards Feliciano, being that all of them were in Buffalo together. And guess what? He started the rest of the season. Did it cost the Giants games, like brutally? No. But you could see the inconsistencies that he had in terms of pass protection and all these other different things. Now, of course, the rotating was also in there as well. Ben Bredesen, the one thing I can credit Bobby Johnson with is Ben Bredesen got better with his technique and overall production as a left guard. Josh Azudu never really fixed those issues. Like, you saw him rotate in games. He got hurt, so you couldn't really see that too much. But his hand placement issues were never fixed. And we have yet to see that, honestly, because he has not played at left or right guard for this season. Number 4 is scouting. There's been lifers in the Giants front office for years. Guys who have stayed longer than they are welcome. The game has changed. And guys that have just been there too long. Chris Pettit, he got fired for being a rat. Chris Mara was in the middle of it. He's, I think, still involved to some sort because his brother is the owner of the team. Mark Ross, that's a famous one. Tim McDonald. There's a couple other guys in there, and it just wasn't good. Like, that was one of the bigger issues during the Reese and Gettleman era that Joe Schoen turned around. I've been telling you guys about a theory that I have about the New York Giants and scouting. The lifer one isn't necessarily a theory of mine. This one is. I'm going to critique Joe Schoen whether you guys like it or not. I'm going to critique the Buffalo scouting whether you like it or not. I think the Giants have gone wrong in this area, and maybe you could attribute it to the Gettleman era. Find wherever it pieces well. Josh Azudu, okay? Even though he's been solid as a tackle, but solid doesn't mean much. Again, he struggled against San Fran. Signing Mark Glowinski, John Feliciano. There's a couple other guys you could name. McKeithen, the jury's still out. Now, why did I bring up those 3 names? Those guys were known as run blockers better than pass protectors. And all of those guys were brought in 2022. Now, did the Giants imagine that they would be a better run team than pass team? I don't know what their plan was in April. I think so, because guess what? They had not made their mind up on Daniel Jones. After 2022, they did. And they said, look, we got this guy for the next 4 years, but really 2, security blanket contract. Now, why am I ripping them for bringing in run blocking guards? I'm ripping them because there's one thing that they lack, especially Glowinski and Azudu, and I can't say too much for Feliciano. I have to pull a Robert Saleh here, look at the film. But I think the Giants, and this is going to be a hot take, I think they relied, scouting-wise, on athleticism more than power. Because what can Josh Azudu do? He can pull. Glowinski, he can pull. Feliciano, he can pull. All those guys are good pulling guards in the run game. Here's the problem. You have a division that is stacked with defensive linemen. Micah Parsons, Dorrance Armstrong, DeMarcus Lawrence, the new era the Eagles are building up in Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, Jonathan Allen on the Commanders, Daron Payne, Montez Sweat. I think, like other people, that it is a passing league. And even if you don't agree with me, it's still a fair point to say that you needed to get better pass protectors. And if you didn't really think too highly of Daniel Jones coming in, knowing that you had to build for the future in a sense. You should have taken a quarterback. That's just my personal opinion. Again, that's going to be for a separate video maybe. But why am I saying that these guys, they're better run blockers and pass protectors? Number one, the film shows it. Number two, Josh Ozudu and especially Mark Lewinsky, they lack the upper body strength. They have the strength and the build down there in the legs to go pull, do this, that, and the other thing. John Feliciano at the time too. They don't have the upper body strength. And once again, when you have a division of Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Montez Sweat, Dorrance Armstrong, DeMarcus Lawrence, Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, for years and years and years and years to come, that's not a good solution. Now, in my personal opinion, I've connected this a little bit to Buffalo. You guys remember the name Cody Ford. He had similar issues. He was a second. Now, I'm not blaming this on Joe Shane, of course. This was Brandon Beane. Drafted him in the second round. He ended up moving from tackle to guard, and that didn't even do well. His hand placement, inconsistent, susceptible to the speed rush, and yeah. One of my biggest gripes with Bobby Johnson is this. A guy by the name of Wyatt Teller showed promise in 2018 for the Bills when they drafted him. They replaced their O-line coach. I don't remember who it was. It's a notable name, though. They bring in Bobby Johnson. They don't like him. Boom. Wyatt Teller is shipped off to the Browns. Wyatt Teller is an all-pro right guard right now. The Browns love him. And who the hell is their O-line coach? Yes, it's Bill Callahan. So I thought I'd bring that up. Just a thought. Now, their signings haven't been great on the O-line. Their rankings haven't been great. But they haven't been terrible. And I'm going to get to that in terms of expectations. Buffalo, in terms of week 3, this past week 3, as of week 3 by Pro Football Network, they ranked as the 21st offensive line in football. With names like Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, Mitch Morse, who they signed from Kansas City, and their 2 guards, which the names are escaping me right now. Connor McGovern is one of them, not the Jets, but the Cowboys' Connor McGovern. Now, again, notable signings. Brian Winters, who was a former Jet, he wasn't very good. But in 2020, when they signed him, and during the year, was one of the dead last guys in pass pro efficiency. Ike Buttiger, I did want him in 22 and 23 also. But he was a better run blocker than pass blocker in 21. Things did flip in 22, though. You want to have a guy that's balanced. Quentin Spain, Greg Van Roten, he wasn't very good, and I believe he's with the Raiders now. Ryan Bates, 23rd in pass pro, 56 as a run blocker. Now, I get it, yes. Ike Buttiger, Ryan Bates, those are guys that are backups in this league. They'll spot start for you if you need to be with an injury and stuff like that. But I'm just making a point out there. Pass block win rate, all these different things. If you look at pass block win rate in 2022, the Bills were 4th, and they were 22nd in run block win rate. That doesn't matter much to me because they really don't have an emphasis for the running game. But again, a reference, PFF pass blocking grade 64.1, which was 21st, and the run blocking grade was 28th. So you move to 2021, PFF ranked the Bills as the 17th best O-line. You move to 2020. I'm not relying on PFF this time, but I'm relying on pass block win rate. They were 4th in the league, but run blocking was down. It was 29th. So again, the emphasis between passing and running, all these different things. You want to be balanced at the same time. I'm not trying to rewrite a narrative here. I'm just bringing you guys the facts. 2019, the first year under Bobby Johnson, they were 21st ranked by PFF. PFF ranked them 26th in the year before Bobby Johnson, 2018. Now, here is a little thing I just decided to come up with, which is going to lead into my final thoughts. That's this. We can laugh at them for having a hilarious quarterback. We can laugh at them for having a head coach who has no idea how to get the locker room under control. My friends, I'm talking about our rivals across town, that is the New York Jets. But what we can commend them on is that they have a very good pass rush. They have guys in and out of there. If Ulbrich did not, and that's their defensive coordinator, if Ulbrich did not sit there and play zone, their guys would get home more, in my personal opinion. You got the names of Quinn Williams, Michael Clemens, Jermaine Johnson, John Franklin Myers. I think I mentioned Clemens already. Will McDonald. I think he needs to get more snaps. Bryce Huff, who is a great third down and pass rusher, by the way. Why am I talking about the Jets? Well, you guys remember earlier how I was talking about the Eagles, and I was talking about the Commanders, and I was talking about the Cowboys' defensive lines? Well, let's see how the last 3 games, and also a game against Miami, the Jets fared against Josh Allen and that offensive line. Well, in 2023, the first game, 5 sacks allowed and 9 quarterback hits. That was week 1 when Aaron Rodgers got hurt. 2022, their first game, which was the one Zach Wilson won at MetLife versus Josh Allen, 5 sacks and 8 quarterback hits. 2022, which was game 2. Mike White started that game, broke his ribs, 3 sacks, 6 quarterback hits, and then also a game versus Miami, 4 sacks. And the Patriots had some good sack numbers in 2022, but also they did not get much success against the Bills' O-line. I know, once again, that it might be narrative-based, whatever you want to spill the beans in the comment section about. I just think it's relevant because I ought to bring up both sides. Why am I really pointing out this Jets O-line and all this other stuff? Well, let's get into the final thoughts, shall we? And I know I've been rambling for a long time. I have been. Where are expectations as far as personnel goes? Well, let's see. John Michael Schmidt should be a hit in most scenarios. He should. Center, probably the best center, or I would say most pro-ready center in the draft. Evan Neal, he should be hitting. He's not. 7th overall pick in 2022. You should have some solid expectations for Josh Zudu because he was drafted in the 3rd round. Now, they're probably not going to sit here and play him yet because I guess right now they like McKeithen better at right guard, and left tackle is taken by Thomas. So they may think Zudu, he's the swing tackle right now. That's my opinion. Andrew Thomas, we know what the expectation is. Push him off to the side. Ben Bredesen, above average at times, but you can't expect him to be a Pro Bowler. And then the rest of the guys follow in as backups and whatnot. So the utilization of personnel has been poor on some points. We get that. Trust me. Now, what am I talking about in terms of expectations? We already talked about personnel. The unit. The unit needs to be much better. Continuity is a word that gets thrown out a lot, but I think continuity is one of the biggest important points in terms of this O-line. I get it. Injuries happen, but you could have had these guys playing a little bit more in camp in the preseason. I get it's revisionist history, but you didn't have to do the guard rotations. You really didn't. To be honest with you. You didn't have to rotate Zudu, Bredesen, and JMS every single snap on every single practice note, whatever. So you could say that. I'm not going to blame that too much. Now, I'll get into scouting. I'll get into coaching. Scouting, they need to be better. I think they need to put their prioritizations somewhere else. Cut this crap of, these guys need to be super athletic with the legs. No. They need to have here. They need to have upper body strength. And this I'll get into maybe in a minute or two because I have a big picture thing. Coaching, I don't want to go through 700 O-line coaches, but Bobby Johnson needs to do a better job. Let's be fair. If we're going to sit here and prioritize scheme and, Evan Neal is still not improving by the bye week, I think you need to make changes. And bring in whoever's next. I know they had Sperano's son. I don't think he's with us anymore. Bring in somebody. Or just say, look, I'm going to coach this O-line myself. Right? So there's that. And then what's the root of the issue? It's really all those four. It's continuity, it's personnel, it's coaching, and it's scouting. And yes, I did attack Joe Schoen's personnel department a little bit. But why am I going to sit here and attack Buffalo in terms of their scouting department just a tad? Why am I sitting here and saying, oh, the sack numbers for this, that, and the other thing? Well, guess what, folks? We can sit here and argue about Madden football, Xbox, whatever, nonsense, right? It is a modern day passing league. We get that. Let me ask you guys this. Do you sit and look at the Buffalo Bills and say, man, that's a good O-line. They've been drafting for years, and they have replacements. You know who you're looking at when you're saying that? You're not looking at the Bills. You are looking inside your own division at the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. You're looking at those two teams. Because guess what? Terrence Steele is just a diamond in the rough. He was an undrafted free agent, I believe, out of Clemson or something. And they just locked him down because he's been stellar. Bidish has been average at center. Tyler Smith, he's been in for 2 years. We'll see what happens. Tyron Smith, when he's not hurt, he's still playing at an elite level. Zach Martin, again, was one of the best and still is one of the best. You go to the Eagles, I think they even done a better job. You picked out a guy that was playing fucking rugby, and he is now your left tackle for the next few years. Left guard, you drafted Landon Dickerson after you got rid of Isaac Sumalo. To me, that's an upgrade. Center, Jason Kelsey. Trust me, they have his replacement waiting in the wings somewhere. Cam Jurgens would have to go back and look at the film and all the other stats. And Lane Johnson out of Oklahoma. He's been their rock since 2013. And Brandon Brooks preceded a guy by the name of Cam Jurgens. So, one thing that Dallas and Philly, one thing that those two teams, count Washington in an aside scenario, what they have over us is the trenches battle. We could sit here and say, the Giants improved their weapons. The Giants, could improve their quarterback. However you feel on Daniel Jones. They can improve their secondary. They can improve this. Folks, I know it's a passing league, but the game starts in the trenches. We imagined, separate topic, that this team was going to be very good in a pass rush light. They haven't shown up. Dexter Lawrence, he's been the only one. Leonard Williams, he's been a little consistent. Kayvon Thibodeau hasn't shown up. Azeez Ojulari didn't show up in the first game, and he's been injury prone. But let's bounce back to the O-line. These average little plucky guys are not going to work. Now, why do I say that? Because the coaching's not there. The coach, in terms of the O-line for the Cowboys, I believe it's Solari. I believe it's Mike Solari, if I'm not mistaken. Let's take a look. Yeah, he's the O-line coach in Dallas. Now, is he a great coach? No, but they already have great personnel. Jeff Stoutland, Staten Island native, by the way, is one of the best O-line coaches. And I was clamoring for him after Doug Peterson was fired and when the Giants were still going through some O-line interviews and whatever. But the thing is, to be competitive in this division, you have to have great trenches. Not good trenches, not, a couple of guys you picked off the scrap heap. No. God damn it, you need good trenches. And you need good coaching with that too. You can get away with some average parts on your O-line if you have coaching. The Giants don't have great coaching on the O-line. Sorry to tell you that. But that's it. I'm done rambling. It's a long video. Like, comment, subscribe to all the good stuff. Turn on post notifications so you know when live stream pops or drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. Again, we'll be doing the Thursday night game. I apologize for rambling, but this video needed to be done. Peace out, guys. See you later. Stay cool, and let's go Big Blue.